background. At the time, my boyfriend, Mark, and I met. We also met his ex-friend. We'll just say he's a choosing beggar. We'll call him Dan. He needed a place to stay twice, but revenge comes with the second stay. So BF and I had got our own place. It was really cheap and shabby, but it was ours. We lived quietly and happily before we had moved in during a month-long breakup between me and Mark. Dan and Mark hung out a lot. You see, Dan's girlfriend just had a baby, and things went sour when she decided that he was definitely not going to be around her child with his sexist and abusive ways. He bragged about beating her and using her for her car. Thankfully, the mom was smart. So one day, Mark got a text from Dan saying he needed to stay for a while, and I regretfully had pity for him and told Mark to say yes. The first time, he slept on the couch, stole our knife, and joked around about killing us, told us to obey him, and constantly told my boyfriend to leave me behind my back because I'm fat and ugly. He ate all our food and paid nothing. Mark and I were scared of him, so we just listened. Eventually, Dan left to go stay with another friend of his. I was so glad that he'd stop influencing my boyfriend to abuse me out of fear of Dan and to finally have a quiet house again. A few months later, Dan texted my boyfriend, but we ignored it, so he ended up calling me. I told him to get lost, but he apologized and said he wants to stay to better himself so that he could eventually get rights to his child. Again, I was an idiot and said okay after he wouldn't stop apologizing and begging. So again, he came over. For the first few days, I tolerated his drinking and need for control. But around day 5, Mark asked Dan to clean up his room. I was at work that day, came home to my stuff in the garbage. Needless to say, I was pissed, but again, I didn't do anything. I just grabbed my stuff out. I just started my new job at a fruit and veg shop, so I didn't want to get too stressed about anything. One night, my boyfriend and I had a fight because of Dan, and I left the house, went to the community bathroom, and cried. I came back to the house to find my boyfriend being cussed out by Dan about getting rid of me, saying if he couldn't do it, that he'd do it for him. He wanted to kill me. My boyfriend gave Dan the keys and got up and left. I ran in and grabbed my debit card and then ran after my boyfriend. Mark tried to break up with me if I didn't run away to another state with him to get away from Dan. We fought, but I chased him all night, making sure he didn't do anything stupid. I called people, but no one could help at the time. I had an idea. While my boyfriend was crying and hugging me, apologizing for letting everything that happened happen, I thought about what to do to get him out of our house that he was in, probably ruining everything in there. Eventually, I thought about it, and I made Mark come with me to the police station, hoping they could do anything. After waiting and telling them Dan's details, they said we can remove him from the house, but he can come back after you if we don't find a warrant. My boyfriend was backing out, but because Dan had been arrested before, I was praying that at some point they'd find something. Eventually, the cops drove us towards our house as they got a call from the station saying that yes, there was an outstanding warrant for 2 missed court dates. I cried in the car of relief and told the police officers all of the emotional and physical torment I went through and how he abused his ex. The police officer turned to me and gave me a hug. Luckily, these were 2 fun cops. Cop, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Are you okay? Nay, no, I'm done. I don't want him to come back and threaten us anymore. Cop, well, it's 5 a.m. Let's have some fun. I want you 2 to pull a stunt with me, so there's no way he can tell that you were the ones who let the police know of his whereabouts and so that we can make sure he doesn't come back. Nay, I've been really wanting to get him where it hurts, but I don't have any plans. The cop then came up with a masterpiece of an arrest. Mark was going to go through the window, open the door from the inside, and then we would pretend like we went back and slept for the night. Then we waited until Dan had to pee since there was no bathroom inside the place. He had to go outside. Once the police saw him, they let him go inside and we signaled them through the window, leaving the door unlocked. The cops came running down the hill and into the house with their guns pulled out. Cops, open the door, Dan. We know you're in there. We have a warrant. Open this door right now. Nay, in a pretend tired and unknowing state. Oh my God, what the hell? The cops busted in while Dan tried to go through the window. They pulled him to the ground and he ended up getting a blood nose. Dan, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Get off of me! Mark, yeah, what are you doing? What the hell happened? Why in my house? One of the cops winked at me. A neighbor let us know that there was a new resident here. As it was a high-crime area, the police do get notified, but we kept Dan and his identity secret. But Dan did tell one neighbor his full name. Dan. Oh, what? I'm gonna kill her. She's dead. At this point, I have to hold back the laughter. The cops put him in handcuffs, and he was arrested for the 2 court dates and resisting arrest. The cops then fake yelled at us and warned us about having criminals in our home, but when the other cop put him in the back of the car, the cop who came up with the plan hugged me and wished that I was satisfied with the revenge. Of course I was. They left, and me and my boyfriend got some well-deserved rest. We moved out 3 days later, and Dan went to jail for 6 months. He texted us later asking again, to which we lied and said that unfortunately the cops are watching us now. I said he's a jerk for everything he did, to which I just got a few ugly and fat texts. Needless to say, he's gone, and not only did he get some time out for what he's done, but is paying off a hefty fine as well. Sweet, sweet revenge. Many years ago, I resided in a picturesque and sun-drenched southern state where I had the pleasure of owning a charming little house encompassed by sturdy fences. A 5-foot fence guarded the front, while 8-foot fences lined the sides, and a resilient 10-foot chain-link fence shielded the back. Working from home was a fortunate aspect of my life, and my patio served as my office on most days, barring inclement weather. To keep me company, I had Sari, my delightful canine companion. Sari was a 1-year-old German Shepherd Rottweiler mix, a substantial girl weighing in at 120 pounds. She possessed a gentle and amiable nature, but also exhibited a protective streak. Although well-trained, she had an inclination to disappear occasionally to frolic with her animal pals. Thus, I made it a point to keep her on a chain whenever we ventured outdoors. The alleyway behind my house became a regular path for high school kids traveling to and from school. Most of them would pause to exchange greetings with Sari and shower her with attention, which she adored. This routine never bothered me. In fact, I found it rather endearing. However, on one fateful day, I observed a troubling development. Whenever Sari was left alone outside, a group of kids began tormenting her by shaking the back fence, hurling objects, and subjecting her to loud, menacing shouts. Regrettably, they would always vanish before I could identify them. Concerned about the escalating situation, I decided to install security cameras and ensured that Sari accompanied me whenever I needed to step indoors while the kids were present. One day, consumed by a momentary task, I left Sari outside momentarily while I went inside to fetch something work-related. From within the house, I suddenly heard the fence rattling and, to my horror, Sari emitted a pained yelp. Hastily, I darted outside just in time to witness a youngster attempting to throw a rock at Sari, accompanied by a group of their peers. Fury welled up inside me. Rushing over to Sari, I confronted the kids with a composed tone, asking, "Has it ever occurred to you to wonder why I keep my dog chained within a fenced yard?" Without further ado, I unfastened her chain. Sari swiftly dashed toward the back fence and effortlessly scaled over it. The kids fled down the alley in a panic, pursued by Sari's resounding barks. Allowing her a brief chase for approximately half a block, I whistled for her to return. Happily, she trotted back to me, wagging her tail. I thoroughly examined her to ensure she was unharmed and rewarded her with a treat. She was perfectly fine. A couple of hours later, one of the kids returned with their mother, a woman whom we shall refer to as EP, entitled Parent. EP shouting, "You witch! You unleashed your dog to attack my son. They were merely having some innocent fun. He's just a boy." The child in question appeared to be at least 16 years old. "You scared him. It was all in jest. You had no right to do that. I'm calling the police and demanding that they put down your dog," and so on and so forth. A barrage of complaints ensued. As EP continued to spew threats and profanities, I found it impossible to interject a single word. Feeling increasingly unsettled, I decided to contact the police. The operator on the other end of the line could discern EP's clamor despite her being at least 40 feet away from me. Remarkably, the police arrived promptly, merely 5 minutes later, with 2 patrol cars and a total of 4 officers. The officers, all amiable gentlemen, divided into 2 groups. One pair approached me, while the others engaged with EP and her son. Unabated, EP persisted in her cacophony of screams and curses. I proceeded to provide a detailed account of the incident, presenting the officers with the video evidence as well as Sari's veterinary and training documents. I filed a report and expressed my desire to press charges. Meanwhile, Sari, reveling in the newfound attention from her temporary guardians, basked in their affections. She wore her unmistakable happy face. Yes, Sari indeed has a smile that warms the heart. Accompanied by Sari, who was now on a leash, the 2 officers and I ventured outside toward the other group, keeping a distance of approximately 10 feet. Unexpectedly, Sari abruptly positioned herself in front of me, halting my progress, and commenced growling. The skin around her face tightened, giving the impression of a hairy skull. The fur along her back stood on end. Sari's fearsome appearance can be quite intimidating. EP shouting, "See! That witch trained that dog to attack black people. Racist witch. That dog needs to be put down." It's worth mentioning that the 2 officers accompanying me were African American. So, no, that part always irks me, but I included it for context. Sensing the escalating tension, I beckoned one of the officers who had been conversing with me earlier. Cautiously, he approached, mindful of Sari's prominent display of teeth. Stepping back toward my house, I discreetly informed the officer that either EP or her son might be carrying a weapon, which had triggered Sari's protective instincts. This had occurred on multiple occasions in the past. Perhaps erring on the side of caution, or to placate me, the officer decided to conduct a search of EP and her son. Astonishingly, EP was found to possess an unregistered firearm, while her son carried a 6-inch switchblade, which was prohibited in that state. Consequently, in addition to facing charges of animal cruelty, EP and her son were also charged with carrying concealed weapons, possessing a firearm while on probation, resisting arrest, and a few other offenses. Throughout the entire ordeal, EP's ceaseless screams persisted even as she was escorted away by the police. Neither EP nor her son ever crossed my path again, and the kids who had previously harassed Sari ceased their troubling behavior. Needless to say, this was not the conclusion EP or her son had anticipated. As for me, I derived a certain degree of satisfaction from the outcome. I was in boot camp with a bunch of other guys, and there's this one jerk who everyone hates. He doesn't get along with anyone, and he's extremely selfish and rude to people. For example, me and my buddies might be chatting, and he would yell at us to shut up. He insults people and calls them names for the slightest mistakes during training. He's so hated by everyone that he is the only one not invited when we planned a get-together on one of our free days. One time, he argued with the whole bunk room because he wants to turn off the fan at bedtime due to the noise, while everyone else wants it on because it's hot as hell. Mind you, summer nights can reach up to 40 degrees Celsius in my country, and nobody can get a good night's sleep when we're all sweating and cramped in a tiny room. Yet, the bully even went against the wishes of the majority and sneakily turned it off in the middle of the night. There's another instance where he nearly started a fight in the back of a van just because a guy accidentally bumped his head onto his head. He slapped the other guy's back of the head hard in retaliation, and one thing led to another. To give some context, this is a tiny military van with up to 10 or more people crammed inside. Accidentally, bumps and such are to be expected. What's even worse is that me and some others are holding both of the guys back to prevent a fight. Bully wasn't even apologizing or explaining his side. He just kept provoking with lines like what? "You want to go? Come at me, dumb jerk," and such. Luckily, things didn't escalate. One day, I saw an opportunity for some payback. I'm the last one to leave the room one morning, and I had the chance to intentionally untidy his bunk bed to get him in trouble. Since we're expected to keep our stations tidy at all times, that's a big no-no where you could get punished with exhausting exercises. Looking back, though, does he really deserve it? Was it childish? It did seem petty looking back. I got an innocent person punished for something he didn't do, even though he's a jerk. My only defenses are that it's not a huge punishment. In fact, some sergeants might let you off with a strike and a warning. For those wondering why nobody talked to the superiors about it, you can't really report him for anything verbal in boot camp, and the sergeants don't care if the recruits get along or not. Bully doesn't violate any official rules, save for that time he almost started a fight